Hurts, man. And let's just start with the meat of the conversation, right? I'm not gonna dance around it. Let's get right into Jalen Hurts because he is the big storyline heading into this season. Not so much his camp. Not talking about camp. Anything he does good, anything he does bad is kind of all mush to me. His evaluation starts week 1. But my question is, how are you going to measure success for Jalen Hurts this season? Is it going to be something you can point your finger to, whether it's statistics? He's going to throw for X amount of yards, touchdowns, yada, yada, yada. That's what some people say. Or is it team success? The Eagles win a playoff game. They win a division. That's good in my book. Or is it the eye test? Is it his mechanics? You just watch the game and he's improved in certain areas.
It's going to be some combination thereof. I'm a stats guy, obviously, first and foremost. That's why I'm on your show. That's why I'm on most shows. What the stats say is that once the Eagles decided to really lean into his strengths last season, the offense functioned at a really, really high level. I mean, there was about a 2-month stretch where the Eagles had a top 5 offense in football, with Jalen Hurts being the biggest reason why. That's just objective. It's also true that Jalen Hurts was one of the least effective, pocket passers last season amongst all quarterbacks that sort of started and finished the season as starters. What I can tell you with certainty is that if Jalen Hurts does not improve demonstrably as a pocket passer, his days as the Eagles quarterback are numbered, and this team's ceiling is probably a one and done in the playoffs. However, it's going to be challenging for us to separate his play from team play, because from where I sit, at least, look, I might be biased, at least to some degree, but as objectively as I can look at it, throw away quarterbacks for a moment. How he's built a top 5 roster. You and I have the exact same thought in this regard. I think the Eagles might have the best offensive line in the sport. Find me one better. They might have the best cornerback tandem in the sport. Find me one better. They have the deepest defensive line in the sport. Find me one deeper. And in all likelihood, they have a top 10 group of skill players for the first time since 2017. Find me 10 better. So, right. I mean, look, the stage is set for Jalen Hurts to improve. What I don't know is how much of his improvement will be tied to all those external factors. In other words, if he throws 80 passes this year that he threw to Jalen Reagor, 80 passes to A.J. Brown this year, the same ones that he threw to Jalen Reagor last year, that's not necessarily Jalen Hurts improving, but the results will be better, right? So for me, a lot of Jalen Hurts' eval will come down to moments. It'll come down to specific drives. It will come down to when you sort of have to have it moments in the fourth quarter. It's going to come down to when the Eagles are down 10 late in the third against a good defense, and they know he's going to have to drop back 5 steps and fire the football when there's he's in front of five pass rushers. So it's sort of a combination thereof to me. I have no question that his stats will be better because the group around him is so good. But I think it's going to be important for us to separate that from Jalen Hurts' play individually, which will ultimately be what Howie Roseman uses to drive his decision moving forward.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting conversation, right? Because a lot of people on social media and Eagles fans are having this thought process of, some people say, well, what if they get to the NFC Championship? Well, like, we're talking about this roster. How does he look? That might not be so much team success. If he throws for 4,000 yards, the guys around him. My thing is, to me, it probably all starts with the eye test, the mechanics, everything he struggled with as a passer last year, going through his reads, his progressions, not bailing on a clean pocket too soon, accuracy on the deep ball, et cetera, et cetera. If that comes first, if you can watch, like you said, even in the late moments of a key game, if you can watch and point your finger to that, I think the stats come from that, from him improving as a passer, and from the stats and him improving with this roster, the team success comes. So it'll be interesting to see how he bounces back, so to speak. But we do know if there was one quarterback you can point your finger to and say he's going to put in the work, it's this guy.
Right? Yeah, you're not going to have to include an independent study clause in his next contract without question, like his Oklahoma counterpart, Kyler Murray. But I will say this, to cut you off just for one moment.
Yeah, you're good.
Jalen Hurts last year was a close to spectacular thrower of the football anytime he targeted Dallas Goedert or Devontae Smith or Quez Watkins.
It's fair enough.
So you can construct a strong argument that just the addition of A.J. Brown and thus the subtraction of targets for Jalen Reagor and other scrubs that Jalen Hurts had to throw to is going to improve him naturally. Like, that's very much on the list of options. And so, like, for me, the evaluation of him is going to have to come down to certain moments. Like last year in the Buccaneers game, you knew in the first quarter that he stood no chance and he was going to just get licked, right? When his first and second option might not be there this year, that's when I need to see the improvement, because the stat line is going to be improved. They're going to have a top 5 run game because he's so incredibly effective in that respect. But like putting AJ Brown on this roster essentially eliminates all the excuses that he possibly had. Because look, the Eagles had found a way to essentially find Russell Wilson's a place on this football team, right? With the exact other group of players in place, we'd be talking about the Super Bowl. That's just a matter of fact. And so Jalen Hurts has I think, a lot to live up to, especially given the fact that he's playing for another contract.
Well, let's get into that A.J. Brown addition then, because that was my next question.
Mm.
Obviously, it affects Jalen Hurts, and you can talk about that, and it benefits Jalen Hurts to a great extent. But who does the addition of A.J. Brown benefit the most? Now, obviously, your answer can be Hurts, but it's going to benefit Devontae Smith greatly, Dallas Goedert. So who do you think it benefits the most on this team?
Well, it benefits,
if not Jalen Hurts.
It benefits Hurts the most, but in one specific area that I feel is not being discussed enough. So we had Sal Palantonio on Get Up, and he's done a bunch of hits on some national shows, and he's gotten good intel from Nick Sirianni. What he keeps saying is that the Eagles really want Jalen Hurts to get rid of the football more quickly this year, which I think is obviously imperative. He was more than 3 seconds snap to pass last year, which is just too long for any quarterback in any offense, as we well know. A.J. Brown, I think, will have some say there because that big body on slants is going to be very difficult to defend. But that's not the area in particular that I am watching for most specifically when it comes to how he helps Jalen Hurts. Where I'm looking for specifically is down the field when it comes to contested catches. That is the difference for me, because Jalen Hurts last season really unsuccessful in tight window throws. In other words, when his receivers, when his tight ends, when his backs were covered, blanketed down the field, he completed a very low percentage of his passes. That obviously stands to reason, but that's more of a stat reflective of his weapons and less him, because obviously if those guys are covered, then his guys aren't winning 50-50 balls.
Right.
A.J. Brown is one of the 5 best people on the planet at winning 50-50 balls. He's going to average 20 yards per pop on those if he's throwing the ball down the field in one-on-one opportunities. So Jalen Hurts' decision-making does not have to get that much better. His accuracy does not have to get much better because A.J. Brown has a massive strike zone, gives Jalen Hurts a large margin for error, and thus I'm of the opinion that Jalen Hurts has a really good chance to improve markedly in that specific area just because A.J. Brown is on the field and, say, Jalen Reagor is not. And look, if you turn one of those incompletions into a 20-yard gain for A.J. Brown down the field, that's 300-plus yards in a season. That's probably a touchdown or two. That's probably 3 or 4 drives that are sustained. That's the kind of stuff that adds up when you're talking about a team, going from one tier to another. Those are the little things that will really matter. And that's why it was important to me that Howie not just add a weapon, but he had a weapon that is so different than Devontae Smith, because I'm very much of the opinion you build your receiving core like a basketball team. You want short guys that can run. You want big guys that can jump, and you want everyone that can. You want guys like Dallas Goedert who can do both. Right? The Eagles have that. The Eagles have built their receiving core and their tight end group to an extent like a basketball team. There's one of everyone. They're like like the animals on Noah's Ark. Yeah. There is no excuse. No excuse for Jalen Hurts not to improve his performance because there is no route tree that he does not have a receiver now that can run it and go get a ball for him.
It's crazy what the addition of one player can do, but when you bring in a player with the caliber of A.J. Brown, the way that it transitions him to wide receiver 1, Devontae Smith's no longer wide receiver 1, he's wide receiver 2, getting easier matchups. The middle of the field for Dallas Goedert should be incredibly green. So we'll see how that works out. What about in the red zone though, specifically, because they struggled inside the 20 last year? You mentioned the size and the catch radius of A.J. Brown. There's also another guy who he's honestly probably number 4 right now in the wide receiver room, but 5 touchdowns back-to-back years, 6'2", 6'3". Zach Pascal, veteran wide receiver. Dallas, he can help in the red zone. How much improvement do you expect to see inside the 20?
That's a matter of decision-making. It's also a matter of scheme. So last year, I feel the Eagles had the right play calls on third down, by and large. They had a top 5 offense on third down. That surprised me a little bit. Likewise, I was surprised at how badly they were able to convert against good defenses in the red area. And that obviously comes in part from Jalen Hurts' inexperience. That's where accuracy really shows up. There's just less green to work with, right? Every blade of grass is covered, and thus you have to be a little sharper. That's just not in his DNA, and it's also not as easy to run the football. So that's going to be the area that, like, if you're going to look at Jalen Hurts' improvement and ways to sort of sink your teeth into it, the red zone is going to be number 1 for me. He wasn't that effective personally as a thrower, at least on third down last season. You're going to want to see him be strong when he's pressured, of course, against the blitz, all of the sort of traditional areas in which you evaluate quarterback performance. But there's going to be no area more important than the red area because in the NFL these days, you're going to have to average close to 30 points to be a legitimate championship contender. If you average 24 points a game, it means you're settling in the red area. If you're averaging 27 points a game, it means that you're generally converting there. That's the kind of thing. You've identified the kind of thing that's going to be the difference between the Eagles being a wild card team or a division champion. The Eagles winning a first round playoff game or losing 23-17. That's the kind of thing that the Eagles most definitely need to be on their P's and Q's. And that's one specific area where Jalen Hurts' improvement's going to have to show itself, because he's going to have to be more accurate with the football and more anticipatory. Like, sometimes Jalen Hurts puts the football where he wants to, but you can't be a half second late in the red zone like you can be when you're in midfield, right? Like, for me, it's as much timing and anticipation. I think Jalen Hurts sees the field properly. I don't always know that he sees the field as quickly as things are developing. He's got a little bit of a longer wind up, and you got to be able to throw guys open. He doesn't do a good enough job at throwing guys open. The area where that's most pronounced is the red zone.
We'll see, man. It's going to be – I just always look back to that 49ers game. I know it was very early on. I believe it was week 2 last year, but they got inside the red zone, inside the 25, like 4 times. The Quez 91-yard pass and catch down the – and nothing. Like 3 points, 0-0. Like, it was ridiculous. But another guy that can possibly help inside the red zone, help inside the 20s, I got to ask you, maybe it's just Eagles fans that are talking about it. I don't know. But is Miles Sanders' job safe as RB1? Because there's a lot of Kenny Gainwell fandom and uproar heading into camp this year.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I'm out on Miles Sanders. I'm a Penn State guy. I like the kid coming out of school. I think he's flashed plus. But generally speaking, there are something like half a dozen running backs in the sport for whom you could say are difference makers. Guys for whom it doesn't really matter who's blocking. Guys for whom can make the first defender miss consistently. We saw that for a decade with LaShawn McCoy. Sanders, it just ain't one of those guys. He's just not. That's become obvious and apparent. That does not mean that he will not be an effective part of the rushing attack. It does mean that I think Jalen Hurts, the offensive line, drive that primarily, and then Gainwell kind of follow beyond that. Look, this is a massive season for Miles Sanders. What I need to see from my running backs is not, can you gain the requisite yardage that any other running back could gain based upon this behemoth of an offensive line? I need to see you gain 9 yards in a play in which you had 6. I need to see you pop one for 21 when you're sort of dancing in the backfield and you decide to be impatient instead and get swallowed up. We've seen that a lot too. In my judgment, Sanders has about as much to prove as anybody on this team this year, obviously aside from the quarterback. But if you ask me, like my honest evaluation of this based upon the eye test and based upon the data, I think Miles Sanders is a replacement level starting running back in the NFL, and that there is a inconsequential difference between he and pretty much the remainder of the depth chart. That's God's honest truth.
So what you're saying is don't select Miles Sanders in your fantasy football leagues.
I'd be stunned if he had a big season based. Look, we had a pretty good sample size last year of the Eagles functioning at a high level. We know that the Eagles are going to throw the ball with more frequency than they did during that stretch because they have A.J. Brown. Right. We also know that it has been largely a product of the offensive line being a bowling ball downhill and not of any sort of, dashing and dancing from running backs. When the Eagles offensive line was thriving last year, I came on your show and did stats. The amount of yardage that they were creating before contact was absurd. That has nothing to do with who his running back is. I mean, Dylan Davis could be the Eagles running back and he might be able to find 3 yards if 3 yards are available. Look,
I don't know about that, but
look,
Paul Hembekides maybe. 5.
I mean, I have cut up pretty nicely this summer as I'm preparing for the twins to enter my life. But however you slice it, I'm at the point with Miles Sanders where he has to show me before I start believing again.
Yeah, I'm with you. And it just seems like anytime he starts to get the wheels going, an injury pops up and he's out for a week or two, and it slows the whole process down. But let's transition to the defensive side of the ball, because as excited and hopeful as I am for this offense and to see Hurts' improvement, A.J. Brown, when is the last time the Eagles had a top 10 wide receiver? T.O. probably.
T.O.
Right. So, but this defense has me excited, man. What Howie has put together already through the draft, Hassan Reddick, with the addition of James Bradbury, Kazir White, I even like, Jaquiski Tart, I even like. So who do you think is going to be the biggest difference maker added on this defensive side?
Probably Bradbury. That was the most important thing they did the whole offseason when it comes to the defense. And I'll tell you why. In the NFL now, the way that teams play call and the way the game is officiated, you have really no chance to excel on that side of the ball if you don't have representative cornerback play.
Mhm.
And if in certain moments, not necessarily on balance, but in certain moments, you can't play man. Last year, the
Right.
Eagles could not play man, and John Gannon didn't trust them to do it. Now he can, at least to some extent. I wouldn't say that the Eagles have a great secondary, but I think for the first time in some time, they have an above average secondary. And you don't win in the NFL by having a couple great players on defense. You win in the NFL by having a bunch of good ones. And that's what the Eagles have now. They have, I said off the top, I think they have the deepest defensive line rotation amongst, average to plus players
Right.
in the entire sport. And I will yell that from the mountaintops. And I think for the first time in some time, they have a secondary for which every time the ball is in the air, I won't be scared to death. And that's saying something, right? Because last year, when the Eagles were losing games, death by 1,000 cuts,
Right.
playing
Steven Nelson was fine, but
right.
he wasn't a difference maker.
No, look, Steven Nelson was just a guy.
Right.
James Bradbury is a considerably better football player than he is,
Right.
and I also think the depth that they've added in the secondary will go a long way because you have to control for injuries and you have to control for the fact that you're going to have to be out of your base for 2/3 of the time because everyone runs 11 personnel now with a high degree of frequency. Like you're in a division where like you're going to have to cover CeeDee Lamb and eventually Michael Gallup, right? Like this is
Right.
an incredible. The Eagles have gotten torched by Dallas over the years, and Dak Prescott has lit up this secondary time and time again. The Eagles last year had one of the best pass rushing defensive lines in the sport, according to our metrics, and yet they ranked in the bottom 5 of the league in sacks, which is very difficult to do. That is a direct rebuke of the
Yeah.
secondary and a direct rebuke of John Gannon's scheme. I think
Right.
he's a bright mind. I think he knows what he's doing. That's evidenced by the number of interviews that he received this offseason. But like, I'm not that interested if the Texans like John Gannon. I'm much more interested if our defense is going to improve considerably year over year. The Eagles' defense is going to have to be more aggressive. It's going to have to be more opportunistic, and the secondary is going to have to reward the defensive line for creating pressure. And sort of to finish my thought here with Howie's philosophy, the linebackers are going to have to not hurt you. And I think ultimately that's how Howie prefers to build his defenses.
Listen, you say they just have to not hurt you. I think this linebacking core is actually good. Like I think this is Hassan Reddick. Listen, when is the last time we've been able to say that he invested in the linebacker core? Listen, Nakobe Dean was a projected top 20 pick, falls in the 3rd round due to medicals, et cetera, et cetera. He's playing week 1, hopefully, right? Kazir White, former safety, nice addition, right? And if you think about it, Hassan Reddick's technically a linebacker. He's going to be rushing off the edge 95% of the time, but he's technically a linebacker. So I think this linebacking core is greatly improved to Alex Singleton and Davion. I know Davion Taylor and Chubb Bradley and all are still on the team, but the playing time gets knocked down a lot. So with that being said, I asked you who you think is the biggest difference maker on the defense, but between the two Georgia Bulldogs, who makes a bigger impact this season?
I think the big fella. I think Jordan Davis makes the bigger impact. Look, I think Nakobe Dean was a steal. I think everyone in the city acknowledges that. I think we all know that we pulled a fast one on the league, and he will be a good pro for a long time. That's my expectation. Period, new paragraph. Playing linebacker as a rookie in the NFL is incredibly difficult because what offensive coordinators are better at than probably anything else is putting those guys in a bind with mismatches, whether it be backs out of the backfield, slot receivers, tight ends attached to the line, or otherwise. It's just a difficult responsibility. It's very different than playing linebacker in the SEC when you're running downhill and you're tackling, 4 stars from LSU. It's just a different game. So if you look at like highly touted linebackers drafted in the 1st round as rookies, like they'll be lucky if they grade as league average, when it comes to the PFF grades, for example. Like there's just so much responsibility, and there's such a great learning curve, sort of how wide receiver used to be. And look, what I know about Jordan Davis is that he is a hotel on wheels who was pound for pound, I think, and there's a lot of pounds there, the best college football player in the country last season, at least at his position. Like we're talking about a massive difference maker, the kind of player that if he's on the field, you can't run the ball. Like it's like Vita Vea style, right? So I don't know if he'll be that good instantly. I don't know if he'll be a 20 snap a game guy or a 35 snap a game guy. What I do know is that for whatever snap a game guy he is, those snaps are going to be very difficult to run against the Eagles. And while that's not as big a deal as it used to be in this sport, he will be a difference maker in the middle, and there will be a lot of fun sort of Eagles defense with Jordan Davis on-off field notes. And I think we'll find that he is going to make a huge impact in year 1. I'm not exactly sure how much he'll be in the backfield on dropbacks.
Right.
I do think he'll make a big difference in the run game, and that still counts for something.
I like it, man. Either way, it seems like both can make an impact in their rookie year, which again, theme of the day is haven't been able to say that in a while. I got some Phillies questions for you that I got to get to. So last one for the Eagles before I take up too much of your time. You seem to be very optimistic with them, as am I. If Jalen Hurts is to take a step, to take a leap, so to speak, what is this team ceiling with this roster this season?
Okay, we'll play the game here. I think if Jalen Hurts meets my 75th percentile outcome, considerable growth, the Eagles are going to go 12-5. The schedule's manageable. Their division is dog bleep, and the offense we know. This team went 9-6 last year, or excuse me, 9-7 last year in games that mattered. Right? The Eagles could have, I think, very possibly beaten the Cowboys Week 18 if they felt they had to. They didn't play. And Dak Prescott celebrated his touchdowns like he had won the Super Bowl against you and me playing linebacker, which was an abject joke. That has nothing to do with Jalen Hurts. That was just an observation that I
nice
thought
little
of.
Day dig.
Haven't said out loud for 6 or 8 months. So that's
like
good to get a Cowboys dig in. That being said, the Eagles are going to go 12-5 if Jalen Hurts takes another step forward because, like I said, I think this is a top 5 roster without him. And so if he's going to give me better than league average quarterback play as a starter, look, I think you do the math. The combination of the division, the schedule, the rest of the roster, I think they're a 12-5 team. If Jalen Hurts essentially treads water, improving only because the group around him is better, I think the Eagles go 10-7. That probably puts them in the wild card picture unless Dallas takes a big step back. And if for some reason Jalen Hurts is unhealthy, if he has a sort of difficult time sort of picking up the new responsibilities of the offense, look, the Eagles aren't so good that they will make the playoffs no matter what. To me, the range of outcomes for the Eagles is between 8 and 12 wins, assuming nothing barbaric happens to the quarterback or to the roster. I sort of slant on sort of the high end of that. If I set an over/under, it'd be 10.5. My prediction from this day forward is 11-6. Hopefully the Eagles can obviously maintain their health in preseason, which is always the most important thing. And I think the ease of the early season schedule, like this team could be 4-0 going into that first Dallas game. And to me, like that provides them a really nice springboard. And if you can sort of generate that kind of confidence in your young quarterback, because Dallas is the first month of Dallas' schedule is brutal. So I mean, that could be like let's put these guys in the
Bucks,
grave,
Cincy, Rams,
in the grave right now. And if the Eagles kind of play with that kind of moxie, that like the Eagles could bury the Cowboys early this season. I'm not counting on it, so I'll say 11 from right now. I'll hedge a little bit and say 11-6.